Hey skiers, I'm Jeff from skiessentials.com.
And I'm Bob. How's it going?
Bob and I are here today to talk about the 2025, which also happens to be the 2024 Atomic Hawx Ultra XTD 130 BOA grip walk.
I think you got it.
I think I did too.
That's a long name.
Is it the longest name in the history of ski boots?
We'll have to do some more research on that. But
Yeah.
it's a mouthful.
Yeah, we'll report back on the whether it holds the Guinness Book of World Records for the longest boot name. But yeah, this is really fun. I've been spending a considerable amount of time in this boot this season. I got it. If you watched kind of like the trip report video of my trip with Atomic in Utah, that's when I first got this boot. And we've been trying to work in more and more boot content here at Ski Essentials. So thought it was a great time to talk about this boot a little bit. I've now skied it a lot in a lot of different situations.
And I'm always happy to talk about boots.
Yeah, so you did not ski in these boots.
Nope.
But you're just here with your general boot expertise and some questions.
A list of hard-hitting questions.
And there are some other there's some boots over there that are kind of staring me down right now. It looks like a Technica Cochise 130 and a Nordica Unlimited 130 over there. So we are working on more boot reviews, so keep your eyes open for those. Bobby, what do you want to talk about first in this boot?
First, a disclaimer, as we do in all of our boot videos, that this is specific to this boot and your foot.
Great point.
Sort of like when we did the Kesley boot or the Solomon S Pro 120 with me last year.
Yep. Or Shadow. We did Shadow earlier.
Yep. Those are specific to our feet in these boots. And you cannot sit here and duplicate this and say, this will work for you.
Yep. So we can teach you all about this boot. But as always, the best thing to do is to go see a boot fitter.
Yeah.
Because, you know, this boot might be right for you if you're looking for a hybrid touring boot, or one of those other two boots that I just mentioned might be right for you. I've also got, we've been working on a Mindbender 130. So, you know, there's lots of choices out there, and the best thing to do is to start with a boot fitter.
Yep. And I think, you know, for most people, starting with, you know, the Flex and then the Last are the two places to work from.
Yep, and that's a great segue. Just kind of moving into the features of this shell. This is a 130 Flex low volume hybrid touring boot. So they list it at 98 millimeter last.
Yeah.
28 would be, that'd be really narrow.
It'd be super narrow.
So they listed at a 98 millimeter last. I ski in a 24.5. If you flip this boot over, it's kind of alarming because this boot is listed at a 94 millimeter last.
Yeah.
So very narrow. This also has a 282 millimeter boot sole length. So for me, I'm pretty sure this is the smallest boot I've ever worn, and we can talk more about that when I get to my fit experience and stuff like that. But it is a really, really cool boot. There's a ton of technology here. The material itself is called TrueFlex polyurethane. So, Bob, you were actually just remarking on this, that it's cool that they use polyurethane in this boot. Often with hybrid touring boots or touring boots, you're going to see a different type of material.
Yeah.
So, pretty cool. That TrueFlex is kind of in reference to the fact that it's supposed to maintain a consistent flex in any temperature. And you know what? I think it does.
That was one of my questions because I was interested in knowing kind of how that felt on your foot. And I know that when like, you know, the Kesleys that have really thick plastic, like those are going to feel pretty similar. They're not going to get soft at least.
Yep.
So I was interested in knowing your experience as to that, and we can get to that later. But
yeah, so far so good.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of it may come from how they put this boot together. So they call it ProLite construction. And there's just a lot of like ridges and like thicker sections and thinner sections. So I give a lot of credit to that. They also call the back of the boot the energy backbone. But kind of continuing on with features here of this shell, I don't want to go too long in this video. Obviously, we've got two buckles up here. They are like kind of your classic touring style buckles, so you can lock them forward like that if you want to just have a super loose upper cuff. There's also these like kind of like extra like trap door buckles over your buckle ladder.
Yeah.
So you can kind of like unbuckle and your buckle's going to stay in the same spot, which is pretty nice. Down here on the lower cuff, we've got our BOA. We can talk more about BOA when it gets to performance, but it's there.
Yep.
Really cool walk mode. I can't remember exactly what this walk mode is called in Atomic's catalog. Of course, now I can't do it because I've been playing around with the boot. But it is their strongest, most powerful walk hike mode. Bob, you were talking about what's the piece, the extra part that you can buy, the NAR bar?
The NAR bar, Jeff.
Yeah, yep. So if you own this boot and this is maybe your only pair of boots and you're in a period where you're going to just be skiing alpine, riding lifts for an extended period of time, you can actually swap this whole thing out for a fixed bar back there.
Yeah.
Another thing that's really cool about this is it doubles as the forward lean adjustment. So it comes as 15, and then you can actually get it a little bit more upright to 13 or a little bit more forward to 17. So I thought that was cool.
And on that, we had a question earlier this year on these boots that was, can I do it at home? And I didn't know. I reached out to our boot shop, and I said, can you get this thing to 17 without coming in here? And their answer was, it is physically difficult. It is not impossible, but that the bending of the boot to get that screw back in the hole at 17 is challenging. So for any home DIYers there, you can do it by yourself, but it does help if you have like a vise that you can put your boot in. Just having the right tool and maybe something to pry the thing forward because the hole doesn't line up quite as easily.
I bet they'll be fine. They're all capable human beings on the other side of that camera. So anyways, it is kind of cool how they're like integrating forward lean adjustment into that. It is a really cool grip walk sole. They call it, what do they call it? Skywalk, I'm pretty sure. Skywalk. I'm not a huge grip walk fan, but these are, I shouldn't say impossible. You could probably do it if you got really creative. But, you know, you often see boots with replaceable toes and heels that you can put an Alpine or a Din sole onto. These are full-on grip walk, and I love how it stays rubbery, like, through the middle of the foot there. I've definitely walked around in some kind of sketchy spots in these boots, and they work really, really well. And we can talk about, like, power transfer and stuff like that later in the video if you want to. There is tech fittings. You know, if you're skiing a true pin binding, these will work. I skied them, as far as touring goes, pretty much exclusively with the new Shift 2. Bob, this power strap is really cool. It's a 50 millimeter power strap. I find that it really gives a nice kind of finish to the fit. And then, I don't know if you've played around with this closure system very much, but it's pretty cool. There's kind of like this little switch here, and if you open that switch, you can just take the strap right out. And if you kind of close that switch, then it's basically like a ratchet strap. Like, it reminds me of like putting a whitewater kayak on top of my car, and then you can basically just ratchet it down as tight as you want.
That's pretty nice, because if you're thinking about the functionality here, you're likely going to be needing to do this with gloves on, and your hands are going to be cold.
Yeah, you can just flip it real quick.
So being able to flip that, you know, that's one of my big pet peeves about like this style of power strap on either my RS-130 or the Kesley, is like when I'm trying to take my boots off, my fingers are cold, and that's a difficult thing to push.
Yeah, no, this is a nice little addition.
That's a nice feature.
At first, I was like a little overwhelmed.
Yeah,
I was just like, "What's going on down here?" And then the more I used it, I was like, "Oh, like why isn't every boot like this?" Right. It just works. So I think that's it for the shell. Do you think I missed anything on the shell, Bob?
I don't think so. I will bring up one thing about just that the frictionless pivot. And you do see that on pretty much all touring boots. It does make the that upper cuff adjustment a little bit more difficult, but because the shell is mostly moldable, that kind of takes care of that. But it does offer that frictionless pivot, which is great for touring.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that the shell is moldable. I did not find the need to mold mine, and the reason that I did not feel the need to mold mine has a lot to do with this liner, which I think is really cool. So this is the Mimic Platinum liner from Atomic. Mimic is kind of their proprietary fit system in a liner. I draw a lot of correlations to cork or whatever other materials that you see in ski boot liners, but this is unique to Atomic. I was blown away. Like, this is a really small boot, and heat molding this liner creates such a tight, secure fit. It like pretty much blew my mind.
Anytime that you're able to get this heel pocket portion of the boot heated up, and then your heel sucked back in further.
Totally.
Takes your instep off the front, takes your toes off the front, just creates more room where you need it, and then locks you in where you want it.
And it's very nicely articulated.
Yep.
Like the kind of curve that you have in the back of the boot there of like kind of accentuating the heel pocket there.
Yeah.
It's very cool. This Mimic material is like pretty dense. You know, it's like aggressively dense.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of ski boots that I've skied in where it doesn't even feel necessary to mold the liner. Like Lang Shadow.
Like a Shadow, sure.
Just go skiing. You'll be fine. That like liner has some nice give to it. This is basically the opposite. Like, I would say absolutely do not try and ski in these boots without molding the liner. There's no way I could have. But molding it, it just creates like this really thin but supportive ergonomic fit. It's pretty cool.
And that's also a good point for people that are trying this on in a shop.
Yeah.
Is that what you put your foot into out of the box is not close to what you could possibly end up with.
No.
So even if you're like within the ballpark between the shell and the liner and the customizations possible, like there's a lot of room for customization.
Yeah, totally. Some nice kind of articulation in the back here. You'll see that in most touring boots. Actually, the liner of that Nordica Unlimited over there is very, very similar in that regard. I would be very disappointed in myself if I forgot to mention these 4 pull tabs on the line. 4 pull tabs.
Of them. Yeah, it's amazing.
It like looks so excessive, but in talking to Atomic about it, the big reason why those are there is because the liner molding is so important.
Yeah.
And like you really have to make sure that you're getting your ankle bones into the correct spot in the boot before you mold it.
Yeah.
And it's such a tight fit to start that like it really does help having those side pulls to like get yourself just perfectly where you want to be. I find that it helps all the time. Like I now don't understand why every ski boot doesn't have 4 pull tabs.
Or at least 2. You know, pretty much everything's got the one on the tongue. Yeah. But like I use the one in the back.
Yeah.
Just as much.
Me too. If not more.
If not more. I pretty much
grab my tongue with my hand and like manipulate it. Like,
that's what I do.
Yeah.
And then the back one I got to use to pull the back.
Yeah. So what's up with this, ski boot manufacturers?
Well, this is also like one of those things that you yank out within the first 10 days of
like
skiing.
Rip it out of the back of the liner.
It happens all the time.
Yeah. But if you have 4,
right,
you're like you're kind of dispersing your forces a little bit more. So
yeah, you're increasing your chances.
Unfortunately, now my big pet peeve with ski boot manufacturing is that they need 4 pull tabs.
I know.
And I think that's it.
Yeah.
At least for features of this boot. I thought we would start or kind of talk about performance just kind of chronologically because I feel like that's the best way for me to kind of go through it. I feel like I already covered the fit. Little backstory is like I flew to Utah without ski boots.
That's bold.
Knowing that this was going to be a brand new boot that I had never skied in, and I was about to go backcountry touring and cat skiing and powder skiing on it.
That's asking a lot out of, like, on blind faith.
Totally.
So.
Yep. But
I'm impressed.
I was committed to the process. The molding process, like, really was impressive to me. I couldn't believe how tight it was at first, and then ultimately how user-friendly it was. Like, I literally had 2, like, 8 to 9 hour days in these boots back to back the day after I got them, and that was pretty impressive to me. First part of that trip was touring. Full disclosure, I don't tour as much as some people, but I suppose I tour a little bit, and this is 100% a hybrid touring boot. You can go way lighter than this and like way more efficient for the ascents, but at least for me, for my own kind of personal requirements, honestly, I can't ask for anything more.
Yeah.
The way that it tours for me is awesome. I believe there's like 54 degrees of articulation in the upper cuff when you're in walk mode, and like I felt extremely comfortable. I mean, like, yeah, that thing can go like pretty far back.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. So I loved touring in these boots. I find the hike walk mode just like really easy, kind of like what you were saying with like you don't want to take your gloves or mittens off in situations like that. It was pretty darn windy that day, and I loved how easy it was to just like flip it up into walk mode, pop the BOA. We can talk more about that. Maybe we'll have a specific BOA section to this review.
That's one of my questions.
And then, you know, these buckles are just very user-friendly to kind of push them forward. I think I'm like kind of unique in the touring world. I generally keep my upper cuff buckles closed when I'm touring. I just loosen them up a tiny bit.
Yeah, I think it's preference, and then like lower leg interface.
Yep.
Like how much room, how much do you want, how much do you have?
Yeah.
And there's those questions to be answered.
So they were great on the ascents. During that first morning, we were skiing a backland 109. There's so many widths. I'm pretty sure I'm right with that width. And I loved it. We were skiing like low angle terrain, kind of some like softer but like wind loaded snow. I mean, it was fresh powder, but kind of wind loaded. A lot of kind of like bopping and playing around, and I really, really like the amount of control that this boot gives you in situations like that.
Sure.
It's such a tight, precise fit that like any kind of movement of your body or foot just goes directly into your skis in that scenario.
Yeah.
Do you have any touring questions for me?
I have like touring to resort questions, so we can.
Okay.
I'll do that later.
Well, quick transition. After that first morning of touring, we went cat skiing. It was really just more of the same, except minus the touring. So we were skiing like some pretty deep snow at that point. And again, I find like this boot, to me, just excels in that scenario. Like skiing powder, it's hard to not have fun.
It sounds awful.
But I was really getting along nicely with this boot, and I couldn't come across any limitations.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's a common conversation with hybrid touring boots is, does it have a limitation? And I would say skiing powder in Utah doesn't really have any limitations. The next day we were at Powder Mountain, just riding lifts all day. So that was a little bit different because I wasn't going in and out of walk mode. And it was like, I don't know, I think we skied a lot. I can't imagine how much we skied, but I would say 25 to 30,000 vertical feet that day. And I was impressed that I stayed pretty happy and comfortable on that long of a day of riding lifts. And then once again, like, I didn't find any major limitations of the boot at all.
Yeah.
So I was quite pleased in both of those scenarios.
Sounds like a nice way to break in a pair of boots.
Yeah. Do you have any questions yet?
Yeah, I got some questions. These might cross over into some other things, but...
That's fine.
Atomic you've used the term, did you say hybrid?
I said hybrid. They say 50-50.
They say crossover, and I kind of like the sound of that. So it's billed as a crossover boot. How would you agree with the resort application, and how does that play against touring? So like, we're always talking about uphill efficiency versus downhill stability.
Yep.
You know, both in skis and in boots, any of these 50-50s. So a lot of people kind of look at something like this and say, this is all I'll ever need for any boot, for anything I do.
Yep.
Like, how do you feel that this boot stacks up against some other boots, either Alpine or more touring oriented? You know what I mean?
Kinda. It's probably right in the middle.
Yeah.
I think is the answer that I would give you for that question. I don't know if I'm gonna like get too far ahead of ourselves here or like ruin answers to other questions.
I'll
but
skip them if that's the
so
case.
in that in that Utah, basically powder skiing setting,
Yeah.
I didn't find any, like, I could have skied my Shadow or Speed Machine 130 on that same day, and I don't know that I would have like skied any worse in this boot.
Did you notice any like rear support issues?
No, but again, I was skiing knee to waist deep powder.
Yeah.
So like a lot more up and down, you know, you're not putting like a ton of like lateral forces into your boot. You're not getting like pushed around by the snow as much.
Right.
So like fast forward to skiing, like coming home and skiing these on firmer snow in Stowe, especially on more carving skis or even just on any ski when you're trying to carve. Yes, there is a difference between any Alpine boot or any of the 130 Flex Alpine boots that I've skied in lately and this.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite have the same like very top of the cuff support. You can kind of feel it like bending and twisting a tiny bit. So I hope that answers your question, that it does, like, this can be a true 50-50 do everything boot. I think like the caveat is as long as you're not like trying to carve turns on really firm snow with it.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what I was looking for. And from like a consumer perspective, knowing that this boot aligns really well with comparable gear and conditions.
That's kind of the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Is that like if you're shopping in this category, you as a skier very likely probably have more of like an off-piste mindset.
Yeah.
And if that is true, then it is fantastic. And like, I don't want to take too much away from its capabilities on firmer snow, because it is still a very impressive boot. It's just, yeah, if you're looking for the difference between this and an Alpine boot, you'll find it in carving.
As the snow gets firmer and the skis get heavier and stiffer,
and the edge angles get higher.
You're going to notice it more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like, I'm glad that you brought up snow conditions, because Bob, fast forward again, these are my Utah boots.
Right.
I've made that joke a handful of times. So I went back out to Utah with Rosignol. We did not go powder skiing. We did not go cat skiing. We did not go touring. We skied at Deer Valley. And I skied mostly like arcades and some center soles.
Yeah.
And did a lot of carving on arcades on this boot and was pleasantly surprised. And that was like very soft packed powder with like 40-degree weather.
Yeah.
So very different than the typical snow conditions that we get here in Stowe. And just because the snow itself wasn't as firm, I didn't find the same like lack of like very upper cuff support or power transfer.
Yeah.
The other thing that I noticed like on firmer snow is the grip walk soles. So that's something that like really came up, I guess, for me with the Shadows, because I skied them with grip walk soles and then switched to DIN soles and was like, yeah, this is way better. So if I'm carving on firm snow, I wish I had like a slightly more precise connection with my toe piece, basically, because that's where you feel some tiny lack of power transfer.
Let's talk about that Shadow a little bit more as another example of like a light, like the Shadow is pretty light. It's 2,000 grams.
Yeah, this is 1,800.
1830, and these are in the 26.5, so yours are probably a little lighter.
Yep.
You know, I'm basically wondering how the downhill performance rates, like, can you tell a difference? And, you know, both are that polyurethane shell and cuff.
Yep.
Like, how does, like, they feel different, even just when you pick them up.
They like make a different sound.
They make a different sound.
Yeah.
Is that something that you noticed?
Yep.
in kind of going back and forth.
There's more suppleness in that shadow.
Yeah.
I actually don't really know that one feels stiffer than the other, but like the way that shadow kind of just like eases you into mostly into a carving turn.
Yeah.
This actually feels more like springy, kind of, you know what I mean? And I think like that's part of like that difference in sound. Like it's just got like, there's a lot of energy in this boot. So the way that they like flex and react are a little different, but yeah, it's not as supple as a boot like that. And I would say also not quite as precise, but again, we're talking like really firm snow. And then like you can't walk uphill in a shadow. Right. So it's like a
right. They're different things. I mean,
pointless
they're different things.
not pointless. Yeah. I'm not saying that your question is pointless. I'm just saying that like slightly unfair comparison.
Yeah. And this thing certainly has more capabilities. Like
totally.
Overall.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Other boots in this zone. So we were looking at that Cochise. We're looking at that, Unlimited, Mindbender. You've had your feet in a couple of them. Like, how do you think this one stacks up against some of those?
I don't know. That's a tough one to answer. The fit is huge for me in this boot because the fit, like, and again, it could be very personal to just me, but like, I think every time I ski this boot, you've probably heard me talk about it multiple times, as I say, like, I can't move my foot in like the best possible way. I can just barely wiggle my toes like a tiny bit, and the rest of me is like fully locked into this boot. So probably like an unfair comparison to some of those other boots because this fit just works so precisely for me. I would say like in general, in the like hybrid touring boots that I've used, these kind of fall like sort of in the middle of like, you know, there are lighter boots and then there are like slightly kind of heavier, burlier boots. Like it's been a while since I've skied in a Cochise, but the last time I skied in a Cochise, it felt like a little more robust. Yeah. But like, I don't know that you want that as a hybrid touring boot. It depends on the skier and situation.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like the Cochise 120 that I have feels more like an Alpine boot.
It's close to an Alpine boot. Yeah. Where this feels like this is a true touring boot.
Yeah, and a very advanced one. And that kind of brings me to my next question. There's like more features in this boot than we normally see.
There's tons.
It has
I
everything.
didn't talk about everything.
No.
Because I wouldn't be able to remember.
It has so much.
Yeah.
That does bring with it a higher price tag. I think we have these on our site and at our shop now for $950.
Yeah.
So you're getting a lot. You're getting the technology and you're getting the crossover mentality. Yep. So whereas some people will say, well, I don't want a crossover. I want one Alpine boot and I want one touring boot.
Sure.
In which case you're spending $1,700.
Yeah.
How fair of a compromise is this for that price, do you think? Like, do you see the value in this boot?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many skiers out there where like the kind of one thing that this boot doesn't do particularly well doesn't even matter.
Right.
Like, basically like everyone that lives in Utah, like,
yeah.
you don't encounter firm, icy New England conditions.
Yeah.
That way, sorry.
Well, Sugarbush is that way.
Sure, that's even firmer over there. So, yeah, I would say there's a ton of skiers that wouldn't even find that like power transfer limitation or like the upper cuff stability limitation.
Yeah.
And then it's just, then it's like a tremendous value. Like, I feel like there are a lot of skiers, a lot of avid skiers that really enjoy off-piste terrain that could just own this boot and that's it.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about BOA?
Yeah, that was, I put it down because that was my last specific question for you.
Yeah.
My next one was about BOA.
Yep.
And the way I wrote it, I'll read it how I wrote it and we can kind of go on our own tangent, but let's talk BOA. How does this help or hinder the fit, performance, and user-friendliness of this boot?
So my big assessment with BOA, my big takeaway here, my conclusion with BOA is that the benefits outweigh the potential drawbacks. So there are a few things that I really like about it. one of the things that I really like about it is when this was a brand new boot for me, I just feel like it's really easy to make tiny little adjustments on the fly. So, like when we were touring or cat skiing, like that very first day, like I was literally, like every once in a while I would reach down and just do one click.
Yeah.
And one click is such a tiny, tiny little adjustment that it's really nice to be able to make those like tiny little minute adjustments. I also think it's like slightly easier at the bottom of the lift to just go like that and like dial it back a little bit. And then at the top, like I was probably going like 1 or 2 clicks tighter each run, like our second day at Powder Mountain. So I really like that. This boot fits me so tight already that like I don't feel like I was fully testing like the BOA closure kind of wrap system, because it's like I'm already kind of hitting the sides of the boot, so I don't need to like wrap it in a ton. The other like big thing for me was touring. You just pop it open. So we would get to the bottom of a descent, and instead of like dialing it back, I would just completely pop it open.
Interesting.
Which like I just really enjoyed the simplicity of like dunk dunk.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like feels really good. Which like of course it's not hard to reach down and undo a couple buckles, but yeah, I just found like this is a tiny bit more user friendly for me personally. I think like the one thing that it didn't cause an issue for me, but it's come up as like the kind of one drawback that I can think of is that you can't independently adjust like what would be this buckle and this buckle.
Right.
Because it's just one cable and it's kind of like applying the same amount of pressure to both of those sections.
I found like in my Solomon BOAs that it does the top one a little bit more because it does that one first.
Yeah. And I'm, if anything, with a traditional buckle boot, I'm the opposite.
Your toe
like
first?
Toe is tighter.
Yeah.
And then like this kind of like second buckle or whatever you want to call it tends to be left a little bit looser.
Yeah.
So again, it hasn't like caused an issue for me at all, but I would say if you were somebody with like a really high instep and like very sensitive instep area, then maybe you'd run into a problem, but I think it's pretty easy to like mitigate that situation as well.
Yeah, I've spent more time in those in my Solomon BOAs recently than the rest of the season, and it was interesting, kind of making that switch and seeing how I felt about it, and knowing that this review is coming up. It was nice to be able to get back into BOA world for a minute, and I did find that, like for me, and I think I was telling you, like. I'm 46 years old. I'm not terribly flexible. It's almost easier for me just to either pop buckles or put them down.
Yeah.
Like this twisting isn't as easy for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably going to be different for different users.
Yeah, and I'm just not that flexible.
Yeah.
So it was interesting kind of coming to that conclusion as well. But I do like what you say, like making that infinite tiny adjustments.
Yeah. It's so nice.
Yeah, and you can do that on buckles, but it takes longer.
Yeah.
So that's certainly an advantage for BOA here. But yeah, I mean, no, obviously you didn't see any durability issues. You even have a pretty big chunk taken out of my boot here.
I've skied them hard.
So
I mean,
you must have hit something.
I definitely hit some stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that was probably my ski hitting my boot, I would guess. But yeah, I've skied them super hard, and like the BOA has never like come undone or anything like that.
Yeah.
It definitely isn't even close to breaking. So. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And like again, like going back to micro adjustments on buckles, like of course you can do that.
Yeah.
But like who is micro adjusting their buckles for every run? Like if you were just to like stop at the top of every lift to micro adjust your buckles, that would start getting really annoying.
Yeah.
And like this, it's just so quick at the top of the lift to just be like, yeah, there you go. That felt better. Just tiny little clicks.
Yeah.
So.
And it was fun to kind of be starting my runs on the BOA and do that. Just be like, oh,
yeah,
I'm about to get into it now.
Yeah,
so.
Just throughout the day, you like just keep dialing it in, which I think is cool.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's all I got. Pretty impressive boots. The fit is just like out of this world tight.
Like I wouldn't fit into this.
No,
You're like, this is not.
There's no way.
For me.
Even in your size.
Yeah.
I don't think you're getting in there. So again, like visit your boot fitter.
Yeah.
But if you like a tight-fitting, low-volume boot and you want a hybrid touring boot, this certainly has fully impressed me.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Let us know if you have any questions. Do our best to answer them. We cannot answer whether it's going to fit you,
Yeah.
which always makes these feel a little silly. You know, with skis, like it's pretty easy for us to be like, yes, go get that ski.
Right, that'll probably be wonderful.
Yeah.
But this could be a total disaster.
I mean, this boot, yeah.
Yeah.
This is a disaster waiting to
Yeah.
happen for somebody that buys it on the internet.
Yeah.
Like, you better have a boot oven and be like pretty comfortable with molding your own liners if you were to do that. But no one should do that.
No.
Go see a boot fitter, and honestly, if you try this boot on, do it with an open mind.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be crazy tight to start.
Yeah, the heat moldable stuff is it's a tough sell in the store, you know, to
Right.
propose that someone buys something on faith and be like, well, we can do it.
Well, and it's come up in conversation, like not necessarily in any videos that we've shared, but like there are a lot of boots out there that have been selling really well this season, and a big reason why is that the initial fit when you just put your foot in it in a store is comfortable.
Great. Yeah.
The Shadow is certainly one of those boots where that liner is very accommodating.
Very successful out of the box fit.
Yeah, where this does not fit out of the box. Period.
Yeah.
You have to mold. You have to at least mold the liner.
And like it's almost, I don't want to say it's totally 100% true, but if this boot fits you out of the box, it's too big.
That's got to be 100% true.
Okay.
Yeah. I think so. Although maybe not. There's probably a foot out there that fits it perfectly.
Yeah.
And then like this, I don't think this is going to pack out.
No, day 1 and day 100 are going to be very similar.
Yeah, because there's really nothing to pack out.
Yeah.
Like it's not like race boot dense, but it's not soft and
Yeah.
squishy in there. So if it does fit you perfectly out of the box, you should be good to go for a while.
Yeah.
But I would venture a guess that pretty much everybody's going to want to heat mold it. So
For best results.
yes, for ideal performance. So that's it. That is the 2024 and 2025 Atomic Hawx Ultra 130. No. Atomic Hawx Ultra XTD 130 BOA grip walk.
Yes.
Let us know
all
if
you need to know about the boot.
yeah. Let us know if you have any questions, and we will talk to you soon.
Bye.